Hey friends, this is Audie Cornish, host of CNN This Morning and The Assignment, and guess what? Every story you care about, every angle you want unpacked is now streaming on CNN. That means you can catch my show or other CNN programming whenever you want on your favorite device. And a subscription also gets you access to exclusive video series and unlimited articles. So subscribe to CNN at cnn.com/subscription.
A simple email changed my life. That's how easy it is to become an Olympian, apparently. It's a sentence from the bio of our latest guest on Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy. But that probably betrays all the hard work, dedication and resilience you need to reach the very top. I'm Michael.
And I'm John. But what happens once you've competed at the highest level, especially when the sport involves hurtling headfirst down ice? Where do you get the same adrenaline rush? How do you replicate that thrill and excitement? And what support is there for our athletes once they transition into life after competition?
Hi everyone, it's Deas here, Olympic medalist in the sport of skeleton, and now enjoying life after elite sport and transitioning into broadcasting.
Are you enjoying life after elite sport? You say you are you?
Yeah, I am. I think I do really miss it. I was only having that conversation with my husband last night because it's autumn and it's that time of year where everybody's getting back onto the sled after a summer of training. And that was always my favourite time of year, was that kind of feeling of having, new season in front of you, fresh starts. And I really miss that. But actually, when I dig into what it is I miss very small specific parts of it. There's actually lots of it when I actually think back accurately, that I'm glad to have behind me now, because it is so intense and it's such hard work. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Let's start on the positives then. What bits of it do you miss? Is it the team environment? Is it the structure to your days, weeks, months? What bits do you look back and think fondly about?
I definitely miss I missed my fellow athletes a lot. I think there's something about doing a crazy sport together that bonds you for life. And I think particularly when you've been through career highs and lows with people, and you know that they are the only people in the world that have been in exactly the same shoes as you, that is something that you would then always have forever. And also you spend so much time with your teammates doing our sport. You're traveling together, you're living together, so you become very close with these people. And so to kind of be ripped out of that, it's very all or nothing with skeleton, because you can't just go down the park and do a bit at the weekend. You're either in it or you're out. So being out looking in is quite extreme. And I think I also really enjoyed being able to be so focused on one thing. Athletes talk about being selfish, and I suppose it is that to a certain extent, but it's that sort of single-mindedness of effort, of all your energy going in one direction. And I kind of miss that as well a little bit.
And retirement was only confirmed in April, I think, is when you announced it, and that was a tough decision from what you've said.
It was, because again, just because I love the sport so much, and that the fact that I knew that that retiring meant not ever doing it again potentially, like I said, because you can't just do a little bit. So that was really that, and missing the people were the main things really, and I suppose the other thing to say is I really enjoyed the kind of mastery aspect of skeleton, because you're doing something where there's so many variables at any given time. You're traveling at 80 miles an hour, making split-second decisions, and every track you go to has got 15 to 18 corners. So on any given day, you're trying to improve, so many things. And so that sort of always searching for the perfect run, I think that never leaves you. And I really miss that aspect of it too.
And can you sit there and reflect slightly on your achievements? I mean, we'll talk about them as the podcast progresses, but can you at this stage look back and go, I did all right there?
Yes, I think so. I think, and that was a big driver in me continuing on after the Beijing Games into another Olympic cycle, was because I really wanted to kind of I hate using this phrase, take back control, because it's been used in a different context, but kind of, I suppose, try and write the narrative for myself a little bit, and try and sort of show people what I was about and what I could really do, I suppose. So, and then to be able to finish my career on a medal as well at my last ever World Cup was great. And I think I am very, very grateful that I was in a position to have, to be able to look back now and say, I think there's things I didn't achieve, but there's a hell of a lot that I did and that I can be very proud of.
We spoke to Eve Muirhead on this podcast not that long ago, actually, with 100 days to go to the Winter Games. And she talked about the fact that she carried on after winning her Olympic gold medal, but she talked about the importance of finishing the career on a high. And she said that she couldn't imagine walking away from a sport on a downer, which it would have been had you finished after the last Winter Olympics.
Yeah, I think that was it. I had a strong sense that after Beijing that I wasn't finished. I had, that literally that unfinished business. I needed to prove to myself. I needed to prove to the world that I was, a world-class skeleton athlete. I wasn't about finishing at the back of the field. And so sort of proving that to myself, and I suppose just having peace with things. And as I said, stepping away from that season after Beijing with medals under my belt again, that sort of gave me the I guess the freedom to make a decision about coming back without so much pressure on me, self-induced pressure to answer any questions. So I'm very grateful for that.
What support is there for guys like you when you do go to the organisation and say, I'm stepping off the programme, I'm moving on?
Well, I think it's a mixed bag, and it's very dependent on your circumstances. And as an athlete, I think because I was going through a pregnancy at the time as well, I was very well looked after by the UK Sports Institute and UK Sport. But it was a relatively new, I suppose, a set of processes in place, I guess, that hadn't been there for very long. And you don't have to go back very far to speak to female athletes that did step away from the sport to have a baby and didn't receive, much support at all. So I guess I was one of the first recipients of that kind of new way of doing things and looking at things, which meant that it was nice. I could go through my pregnancy and have my daughter without feeling too much pressure. Obviously there is, that you are working to a schedule, which is possibly different to, non-athletes going through that process. But it was done in a very supportive way. And I think, to be honest, everybody was in that process was kind of finding their feet as well in doing it from the other side, from the sort of coaching and support side too. So, but I think, it was a positive process. And I think that helped give me time as well to kind of work out what it was I wanted to do. Did I want to try and get back into the sport? Was I definitely finished? So it was kind of a bit of a process of checking in with how, because you've got this idea of what motherhood might be like, but until you're in it, you really can't kind of fathom it. So I think you having that time afterwards, after the birth and when you're kind of recovering, having time and space to find yourself again and get your head straight to make those decisions is crucial, because you need it. You can't imagine what it's going to be like until you're there.
Talking of becoming a mother, do you now look at other British athletes who've come back and like won medals after becoming a mother? Do you look at them and go, wow, how did you do that?
Yeah, I have massive amounts of admiration for anyone that does that. I think, like I said, once you're in it, you have a new appreciation for how hard it is to become a parent. And like I said at the top, I think that trying to find the balance between parenting and trying to be a single-minded athlete is very difficult. And, I haven't done it, in anger, as it were, in the competition sphere. So I can only imagine how tricky that must be to try and wear all these different hats. And to be honest with you, it was something that I didn't really have the appetite for when it came to it. I didn't want to have to find out how to do that, if you see what I mean. But I have, a huge amount of respect and admiration for those that have gone on to do it.
Also, it's great to hear, Laura, that UK sport helped you towards the end of your career effectively, because really you're a bit of a cheerleader for them, because they helped you right at the start of your career as well with Girls for Gold. And I wonder whether that shows the development and maybe the way that sport is moving forward in this country, that it's not just about getting people firstly like you onto the podium, but it's also about making sure that you finish well as well.
I think there is now a bit more of a shift that we're seeing towards seeing the whole person, not just the athlete, and actually realizing that that is an aspect of performance as well. If you look after the person, then they're more likely to perform. You know, a fast athlete is a happy athlete, you know, we like to say. And you know, I think I think it used to be seen, I had the perception at least, that looking after the person away from the track and away from the sport was seen as taking energy out of the performance and almost as a distraction. And I think there's been a little bit more of a collective realization now that actually it's the opposite. And so a lot more energy is going into, you know, how do we keep these athletes? How do we keep them mentally healthy as well as physically healthy? And I think the thing is, particularly in skeleton and bobsleigh, it's such an intense environment where you're under pressure very constantly in the winter. You know, you're really going through it week by week by week. So actually having athletes that are resilient to stress, and have an outlet away from sport, that can only be a good thing, because that it's going to give you longevity as an athlete as well. And you know, purely from a numbers perspective as a program, if you can have an athlete that hangs around for 2 or 3 Olympic cycles instead of just one, then you know it's better bang for your buck as well. So I think, you know, from all different sides, there is this realization coming, and I think athletes as well, because of that, are now giving themselves permission to be people as well. And actually, I think that's where social media has probably been a real positive for athletes, is that they've been able to discover different aspects of themselves and put that out into the world as well, so that the audience sees them as multifaceted people, as well as, you know, people that win medals.
And for you as well, it must have been hugely important that you had, if you like, that neat supported end to your career, because if it had been a messy goodbye, then that affects you 1 week on, 1 month on, 1 year on, and moving on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is, again, such an important part of an athlete's career, is how it finishes. And I think it's, you know, that's where the support network, whether that's the paid support network or the family and friends, it's key that you've got those people around you, because exactly as you say, how it finishes flavors the entire thing, the entire memory. It's very difficult if you have a negative, I imagine if you have a negative end to your career, it's then that much more difficult to look back on the memories fondly, even the good ones, because it's all been, you know, tainted by that last chapter. So that was something I was really keen to avoid, was to really try and manage the end of my career in a way that I could be happy with it and be proud of it. So I'm pleased with how I was able to do that.
And when you look back at that career, be very careful how you answer this question. But what brings you the most pride? Is it the husband, the daughter that you met through the sport? Is it the Olympic bronze medal? Is it becoming a world champion?
I think, well, obviously it's family first, and it's amazing how much the sport has brought me, really, because as you say, you know, I met my husband through the sport as well. If I'd never, you know, responded to that email back in 2009 or whatever it was, to see if I wanted to come and push a sled in Bath, you know, we would never have met. And so my life would be completely different. So yeah, there's a huge amount of fond memories. I think, you know, the obvious one is the Olympic medal in Pyeongchang. That was a real, I think we were very lucky in that it sort of captured the nation's attention. And it felt like a real celebration. I think the fact that there were 2 of us on the podium, myself and Lizzie, we were great friends, still are. The fact that we'd come through something difficult and had very different journeys to get there, but then had achieved this thing together, was great. Our family and friends, lots of Brits were there in person as well to celebrate. So it was a really, really wonderful moment. And it's such a funny thing to look back on, actually, because it almost feels surreal now. You know, the memories that I have, it feels very dreamlike in quality when I look back at those snapshots of how it was. So that's, you know, that's incredibly special. But then I think, you know, towards the end of my career, having that World Championships medal with Matt Weston in the team race, in the new team race format, was incredibly special as well, because as I've alluded to, that was about, writing what was possibly at the time the last chapter. And having that world medal was something that I'd never achieved before in my career. So it just felt so special. And to do it with someone that I'd really been through it with as well, like the fact that we could celebrate that together as a team was just, I couldn't have asked for better, really.
This is Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy, and we're hearing from Laura Deas, the skeleton Olympic medalist from Pyeongchang 2018, and history maker at that. Before we look ahead, Laura, when was the last time you sat and watched your ride in Pyeongchang? Because I watched it this morning.
Oh, did you? It was probably a few months ago. I do watch it from time to time, because if I'm going to, for instance, do a school talk or speak about it, I feel like I need to check back in with it emotionally as much as anything else. So I do watch it from time to time. But as I said, like, it's almost like I'm watching somebody else. It's quite strange. But yeah, it's really magical to look back on.
So in effect, an outer body experience. It's just something that you've done, but you've now kind of moved on, as you say. And just on that success in Pyeongchang, how much then did the disappointment in Beijing anger you, frustrate you? What was the problem in Beijing?
It was massively frustrating. Excuse me. It was massively frustrating. I think in my position, I was the only athlete that was going to be a returning Olympian in the skeleton squad. And I felt, as a defending medalist as well, I did feel pressure to perform. Obviously UK sport has medal targets, and I would have figured among that. And you feel the pressure. And also, once you've hit those heights yourself, that's what you expect. And so although the logical side of my brain knew full well that we were in a really tricky spot when it came to how the equipment was coming together or not coming together, the emotional side of me and the side of me that always backs myself wanted to still believe that something amazing was possible. And so there was this tension, constantly going backwards and forwards internally as to how that was all going to play out. And that was really exhausting, because you're, on the one hand, you're trying to be cool, calm, logical, and get to a problem solving place. But then on the other hand, you've got to, at some point, you've got to put that to one side as an athlete, because you've got to stand on the start line week in, week out through Olympic season and try and get results on the World Cup. And you can't do that if you're questioning everything. So there was this constant cycle of disappointment, and then we regroup, and then we're trying to problem solve, and then it gets to race day, and then you're trying to put that aside again. And so I was kind of in this cycle, which became very negative, very draining. So I think, to be honest with you, by the time I got to the Olympics in February, it was a case of just try and enjoy the bits that are enjoyable, try and compartmentalize it, which I think, and that's where having teammates that hadn't been to a games before was so great, because I was almost viewing it, a lot of it, the excitement of it, through their eyes, and I was kind of swept up in their enthusiasm of how cool it all was, and so we did actually manage to have quite a good time in the lead up to the racing. And then but there was always this sort of impending sense of knowing that the race wasn't going to go well, and that the whole world was going to be realizing that I was, in quote unquote, a disappointment. I was going to be failing, if you want to put it that way. And so trying to work out in my own head what that all meant was really tricky. And then to stand in front of the world's media and try and verbalize what has just happened as well was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do, to be honest.
So, not wishing to labour the point too much, you were essentially let down by your tech.
I think, yes, in a word, I guess. I want to stress that it's very much a team effort to get to that start line with that whole kit package, and everybody worked incredibly hard to try and make it happen. But we just we just made the wrong call. We didn't have, and COVID really didn't help with timelines on things, because as I'm sure with Brits, we don't have our own track, so our time windows for testing equipment was very, very curtailed. So we were trying to make decisions more than a year out from the games about what we might need, what might work, and make decisions on things because of lead times, which were essentially guesses. And then you get to Olympic year, you get to halfway through the season, and you've got what you've got, and it's not working. And at that point, you're kind of, that was so difficult, because you're then, as an athlete, I felt really trapped in that situation, because there was nothing that could be done really beyond tinkering around the edges. Fundamentally, it wasn't working, it wasn't going well. And to try and pick yourself up and regroup and sort of try and find that belief and go again each time gets harder and harder and harder. And that did take a long time to recover from, definitely.
And we've got this terrific thread in your sport from the likes of Shelley Rudman, Amy Williams. You've mentioned Lizzie Yarnold, yourself, all Olympic medalists, and now we're handing on that torch, are we, to Amelia Coltman, Freya Tarbutt, and Tabby Stucker? I mean, are those guys potentially going to follow you onto the podium? We should mention Marcus White and Matt Weston as well, who have been in fantastic form as far as the men are concerned.
Yeah, I really hope so. I've got a huge amount of belief in those guys. I think particularly to just talk about the men for a minute, they were with me in Beijing, and I know, they were great athletes then, and they're in a different league again now. And I 100% believe that they can and will win medals. And the women, for them, it will be excuse me, for them it'll be a first games experience. But I medaled at my first games. Actually, most skeleton athletes, if you look at the stats, do medal at their first games. So that's not a negative. They've all won World Cup medals. They're fantastic athletes. They're very different from each other, but what's lovely is that they are all really good friends, and they're very supportive of each other. And that's something that I've really tried to champion through my career, and as I've handed the baton on to them, is to really protect those relationships with your fellow athletes and those friendships, because they are so key to getting each other through those tough spots. And it's a funny one possibly for people looking in from the outside, because they might think, well, hang on a minute, you're competing against each other for those medals, why would you help each other? But really, it doesn't feel like you're competing against each other. It feels like you're pulling in the same direction. And then on race day, whoever has the best day takes it. And that's something that isn't necessarily easy, but we've realized that it's the best way to approach what we do. And it's also, it would be utterly miserable if you weren't friendly and supportive with your teammates. And that's not to say you aren't super competitive, because you are. I don't think I've ever met anyone more competitive in my life than Matt Weston, for instance, but he's also a great teammate and friend at the same time. And I think they're showing that it's possible to do both.
And obviously you and Lizzie created history by both finishing on the podium in 2018. Could Marcus and Matt do that as well? And what about the British hopes of following your World Championship performance in 2023 of this new Olympic event in the mixed team event?
Yeah, it's really exciting. I really hope that they are both on the podium. I absolutely think they can be. Obviously, there's a lot of things that have to fall into place at an Olympics, because there's always elements of luck in our sport. And the fascinating thing about a games is that it tends to be on a track that nobody knows very well. So there's always that dynamic as well. But also, yeah, the team race is very exciting, because it's a new medal opportunity for all of these athletes. So, in my day, I don't think I've ever said that before, but in my day as an athlete, there was only one chance every 4 years to win a medal, one set of medals, and that's it. But these guys have got 2 bites at the cherry potentially. And there are no weak links in that team. Everybody's fantastic. So, and you can see that from the World Cup results, the medals that we've already been winning in the test events that they've been running on World Cup. So yeah, I have high hopes that there will be multiple medals. And also the thing to say about the team races is it's really exciting, because it's a reaction start. So it's a slightly different feel to the individual racing as well. So I really hope that brings a bit of excitement, a bit more extra excitement and new perspective to the sports as well, and showcases them really well, because they are so great.
Now, talking about you and the future, I think you want to, as you said earlier, move into broadcasting, have an opinion. We always want to hear athletes having an opinion. How have you been finding that transition?
I think, well, it's very much still in progress. I think coming out of a performance program and having to find your own feet, particularly for someone like me who is naturally slightly introverted, I would say, and having to sort of get out there and advocate for yourself, and not necessarily have a team of people around you that are going to nudge you in the right direction. You know, it's on you to do it. That's been kind of something that I'm still learning, because naturally I'm sort of someone that tends to sit back and assess, and actually you probably need to put yourself out there for opportunities a little bit more. So that's something I'm learning to do better. I really love now having a bit more of an opportunity, hopefully, to tell some of these stories around sport and around these athletes. That was always something, as an athlete, I really wanted to hear and see, was people telling the stories around the people, not just the performances as well. And so I'm really hoping to play my part in that, and sort of shed a light on the people, and also these great sports that don't get the spotlight all the time, to try and showcase them as well, and show people how brilliant they are. So yeah, just finding my way in that, I suppose, and getting very excited about the Olympics as a spectator, which is really, really cool.
And practically speaking, when you look at that potential broadcasting career that you're embarking on now, I mean, sitting on the BBC or the TNT sofa for 2 weeks every 4 years talking about skeletons, nice, but probably not enough. So do you look at someone like Jeanette Quatchi, who obviously was a Olympic sprinter, doesn't just present the athletics, but we see her on boxing, we see her on cycling, we see her on football, we see her interviewing athletes. The same can be said for Sue Barker back in the day, obviously branched out beyond tennis. Are those the kind of people, are those the kind of roles that you are looking at?
Yeah, of course, people like that are really inspirational, and I would love to, step out of my winter sport lane at some point, and take on other things like that. I think obviously winter sports is kind of my comfort zone, and I know from a career in skeleton that you can't stay in your comfort zone forever. At some point you've got to step out of it, and actually I'm reminded of that a lot at the moment, as I'm kind of looking for these new opportunities and putting myself in new positions that actually once upon a time I was doing that in skeleton to try and get where I got at the end of my career. So actually I can take quite a lot of confidence from the fact that I've kind of, in a very different way, I have been through this process before and gone from total beginner to seasoned professional, and there's no reason why I can't do that in this way.
And when John and I worked with Talk Sport putting our broadcast team together for the Summer Olympics, one of the things that we wanted to do was bring in what you might describe as rookie broadcasters. So we wanted a series of experts who maybe hadn't had much experience behind the mic before. And when people questioned us about that approach, one of the things that we said was, you guys know about being coached, and you're open to being coached, and you are welcome to sitting down and being coached. And I guess that's something maybe that this is a forum now which you can vocalize that and say, train me, teach me, coach me. Yeah. It's what I'm used to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I alluded to there, I think that, you only make progress and become good at something by stepping out of your comfort zone. And I think one of the ways that, the athletes that are the most successful are the ones that are willing to do that, putting themselves in those uncomfortable positions in order to learn. So I think that's something that, like, as you say, a lot of athletes, we've got that inbuilt muscle, if you like, that ability to sort of be okay with being a little bit stretched, or a little bit doing something new, and being okay with not necessarily knowing everything. So I think that's definitely helpful, for sure. And I think I love the fact that I can be close to close to sport in a different way and appreciate it in a different way now, more from the outside looking in. And I guess have the best of both worlds, because I've got an insider perspective, but I'm also able to see it now from where everybody else is seeing it. So yeah, it's a nice spot to be in.
Well, if this podcast is anything to go by, I think you'll be absolutely fine. Two questions to go. You'll be kicking us out of our jobs. Two questions to go, if we may. Eve Muirhead wouldn't talk to us massively about the fact that maybe cross country and cyclocross might be coming into the Winter Olympics. Do you think that snow and ice sports should be the priority for, you talk about the new event in Skeleton, or should we be looking at new sports coming into the Winter Olympics?
I think, to be honest with you, I think we need to innovate. I think you look at the success that Paris had with some of the new sports that came in, and the amount of interest that it generated and attention. I think there's already, I think, a slight danger of, not always, but the perception of winter sports as being possibly elitist, or something that, particularly in the UK, mass participation isn't possible. And I think anything that we can do to counter that is a positive. And as long as the event at the Games is showcasing the best in the world at doing what they do, I think it's a good thing. I think we need the innovation.
And you mentioned Paris, the fact that the Winter Olympics are back in a European time zone. They're going to be during the day where people can watch them in February. That's exciting in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think the fact that we'll hopefully have a bigger live audience seeing things as they happen will be incredible. And hopefully it will bring, the fact that people watching in the UK will realise that, if they don't already, that, my goodness, these mountains, these slopes are only a couple of hours away by plane. It's actually, hopefully it will bring a more accessible feel to the whole thing. Because as much as I absolutely loved going to Korea and going to China and having those very different experiences, there will be something very special about having it a bit closer to home as well, and not feeling so removed from the home support. So I think that'll be really helpful for all of our athletes as well, because hopefully they can have a bigger contingent of friends and family. So yeah, I think it's going to be, and everything that I've seen from Milan Cortina, from the organising committee so far, the venues look fantastic. It looks great. So I'm really, really excited that it's going to be a good one.
Final question from me then. You mentioned that UK sport will have their medal targets for the Winter Olympics. What's the Laura Deas medal targets then for the Winter Olympics?
Oh, that's putting me on the spot. I'm going to put out there, I think we're going to, as a skeleton, or I think skeleton and bobsleigh, between us as Brits, we're going to take home at least 2 medals. I've said it.
You've said it. Well, we'll revisit this when we get to the end of the Olympic Games. 2 medals.
Yeah, feel free to come and phone me and tell me I'm wrong.
Write that down, John.
I've written it.
I would have thought we'd go for more, but we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. Laura Deas, thank you so much for all your insights and talk about life after sport and transitioning into what happens after competition. Thank you for speaking to Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.